Welcome to Oaklings, a podcast about art, creativity, and nature. I'm your host, Lucia Para, Italian artist, illustrator, and children educator with the Reggio Emilia approach. And in this season, I talk with inspirational creatives who grow the arts with children and young people. Welcome. Welcome to episode number 3, in which I talk with Deborah Curtis, founder of the House of Fairy Tales, a UK-based organisation that has 20 years of history working with young people in imagination-based education. 2 years ago, the charity began its full-time project, The Great Imagining, developing a series of platforms for ideas about the future and exploring the transformations we need to make to ensure that our future is greener, fairer and wiser. Together with workshops and events, the main project right at the moment is the first edition of the Great Imagining newspaper, which you can find digitally or buy as a printed copy. The newspaper is an anthology of ideas, debates and future-orientated projects written by artists, thinkers and young people from lots of different backgrounds. Deborah's journey was one that started by being a parent and recognizing how few things in our cultural world were young person friendly, and by the need to create exciting contexts for young people to thrive in their creativity and critical thinking. Also as a community which thrives in diversity and with the idea to offer a rich experience to children in empathy with nature and also young person-led. Deborah and her team led different workshops of different scales, and what I found interesting is that oftentimes the young people that took part in the workshops had time to grow, and they were so inspired by them that they came back, becoming then the enablers for more narrative adventures for others. And so this shows how inspiring what Deborah and the others in the House of Fairy Tales and the Great Imagining are capable of conjuring for young people. I learned a lot from this conversation, and I took a lot of interesting concepts and ideas for my personal practice, and I really hope you will enjoy the conversation too. Hi everyone, welcome to the podcast, this episode of Oaklings. And today we have as a superhero of growing the arts, creativity, imagination and more to young people. And we are specifically talked about young people today. In previous episodes, we have touched on earlier years, and I thought today would be really interesting to widen our perspective and get to know a little bit more about the impact of creativity on young people, because I suppose it's such an important time in our life. And I also guess it's the closest to the future generation we're going to have, isn't it? So we welcome Deborah Curtis. Hi, Deborah.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm very good. It's a very warm day today, which is makes a change because the last few days have been a little bit overcast and raining. But also, you know, it always reminds me of kind of where we are with the planet. So that may well come up in our conversation.
Yes, that would be an interesting point as well. And I have to say to our listeners that I came to know about you, probably that was 2016, because I stumbled across on the internet about this very weird and inspiring project. I think it was called Clockworks. And it was just like young people being like philosopher gardeners, exploring the mythology and science and all the mechanisms around the garden. So my listeners might know already that I'm really much into nature. And so that's how I came to know about you. So yeah, I thought we could start if you can tell us a little bit who you are and what you do and how this journey of working with young people started for you.
Thank you for having me on. It's really a privilege. So I'm Deborah Curtis, and I've been sort of devising, producing, managing, kind of like activating learning adventures for children and young people for over 20 years now. My journey started through having children of my own, actually, and realizing that I was spending a lot of time within the art world. A lot of my friends and peer group are artists or creatives in some fields, very wide variety of fields. And we were, my partner and I were the first people to have children in amongst our group of friends. And I was quite disturbed to realize how little facilities or things within the cultural world there was that was young person friendly. And I also probably my own childhood was quite complex, and I felt that there was things about the schools I'd gone to that didn't really kind of bring out the best in me, and I was really looking for how we can create exciting contexts and exciting spaces for young people to thrive in their imagination, creativity, and critical thinking. So so the journey started I think 2006. Oh no, it was earlier than that. It was back in the 90s when I put on a series of well, actually, if you want to go back even further, I created a creche in our flat, which was a warehouse in Shoreditch, which is an area in London that was undergoing a big period of development. And in order to get time off to do the things that I wanted to do creatively in my life, I thought we'll set up a kind of a space for the children to be during the day, where they can be together and be in a creative environment. So I set it up, and there's a lot to say about that.
This is amazing.
You may well go on to ask me some questions about the pitfalls and the kind of the trouble with trying to kind of create things yourself. But that was a very, very interesting period of time where I had two children under school age, and we created a kind of environment which was a cooperative with other parents, and we created opportunities for the children to learn and be together, that was open and as exciting as us parents could imagine it to be. So
yes.
And then in doing that, I was looking how to kind of make that into a facility that could have a legacy. And I started to do a I kind of saw a building that was owned by the local authority, and in my naive way, I decided that I would go and speak to the head of Hackney Council and say, wouldn't you think this would be an amazing place for the organisation at that point was called Supernova, which was going to include a creche, a nursery, kind of an educational food space, a garden, lots of a resource centre for parents where they could find stuff out. And the chief executive of the council listened to me for way over the allocated time and said, amazing ideas, come back when you've got the money or the something. And I was like, but you've got the building and you've got the money. So I then did a series of events to promote the idea and to start to sort of get some momentum around raising money. And those events was activated something in me that I didn't really know I had, which was an understanding about how to kind of create theatre and kind of workshop-based experiences for young people and their families of all ages, and do it in a way that was kind of not patronising and was exciting for all age groups. So that was how my journey started.
This is so interesting, because we could already talk probably 2 hours only about this, because I can already see some kind of, first of all, very inspirational for any parents who's finding missing things for their children in the general institutional organizations. But I can see two main things: that you were a doer, somebody that does things, start things when I see the need without waiting to have the perfect space or the perfect fund. And also looking ahead when you talk about legacy. So these two things together, somehow now looking backwards, I have a feeling that there were two key, I don't know how to say, skills, or maybe two key things that brought you forward. And so we can now say, oh, I have 20 years of things that I've done. Don't you think?
I mean, a stubborn resilience.
Probably that's a better word, yeah.
I have been very fortunate because my husband's an artist, and so somehow when he was having exhibitions that would raise some money, we were able to kind of put some of our own money to this work. So I have literally done this work out of pure motivation and not out of any kind of financial gain or income, which is quite strange. And I do look at that sometimes, and I kind of because we're not rich people, by the way. So although we're also very privileged, I think there's a kind of a motivation in me to see a better world, or a world that kind of works for everyone, which is very strong. And it's kind of community builder. Like, it's somebody who believes in children. You know, like, the best way to bring up children as a parent is you know, to be within a village, for the village to bring the children up, and for there to be people of all different kind of cultural, social backgrounds, cultures, genders, you know, to have those kind of environments around young people are the best ways of children learning. So in a way, the work I'm doing now was already starting very strongly back then. I always believed in more empathy with nature, with other humans, and in the work being, this is a really important part of what I believe in, is for the work to be young person led. So you know, everything was not teaching. It was kind of I can go on to the boring bits if you want, but the kind of, because I've developed over a very long period of time a set of understandings, philosophies, but also kind of drawn on some bits of academic thinking. I'm not an academic at all, but I've read around the subject enough, and I've kind of had enough experience now to kind of understand that there are different ways of approaching education and learning. I love your connection with Reggio Emilia. Like, it was one of my early influences. I guess
I was going to ask, yeah.
The influence for me, the age group thing's really interesting, because I've always been very stubbornly about it's all ages. And obviously, when I was running a creche in the flat, the children were mainly 2 and 3 years old, but it was really important that there was young people, if there was any teenagers around, that they would come and help. And if there was, so I really, really valued that knowledge transfer. And I guess the age group I've had my focus on, when I started doing the House of Fairy Tales properly, we looked, when I was forced to make to say, what age group were you working with, or what do you focus on? Because lots of funders would say, you have to focus on an age group. You can't say that it's for everyone. So I would then, I'd say that the age group was 8 to 12, which is kind of like the end of primary, the beginning of secondary. Yes. So it shifted its focus to a slightly older age group at that point. But I would really value the teenagers, and obviously the children grow, because I was doing it for many years. The children there would be people who would come back to the events and travel all around the country, actually, to come and find us. So they would kind of get older as time went on. So then they became helpers in the events that we were doing. And at one point, that they went from being a kind of within the narrative bubble to being kind of like the people who kind of enabled the narrative bubble to exist. So they kind of stepped outside of the magical space, if you like.
Now, this is really interesting, because it was not part of my question, but you touched on something, and I have probably a very naive question about about putting different groups' age together. Because sometimes when I plan an activity as an educator, I can struggle sometimes if I have between a 4 and a 12 years old and deliver the same activity. So I can already see here some glimpse of an idea where the 12 years old is actually more responsible or an helper in a way.
Yeah.
How can they enjoy and learn at the same time?
I mean, I think that, and again, it just depends on your the age group of the people that you're working with, and if you have a particular kind of a project, or I know this is going to be listened by people who are in very different kind of circumstances. The reason why I was so keen on the 8 to 12-year-olds as a kind of focus is because I think that people are at that point, they're still in their most imaginative, but they're also they have enough life experience at that point to give them some access to abstract thinking. So you can get them to think about quite sophisticated ideas. And then I think it's exciting because you can create extraordinary narrative adventures of different scales and sizes, which I have done, where if you want to tap into that kind of that part of yourself as a 15-year-old or as a 20-year-old or as a 30-year-old, you can go into that play space, and there's enough sophisticated thinking and stuff going on that it doesn't feel too childlike. And then the younger ones, the under eights, just want to do what the older ones are doing, so they will play so beautifully anyway because they are wanting to be 8 years old.
They look forward. Yeah, they look forward. I can see that they want to be.
They're always looking to learn and to be reaching for that older level of sophistication. So however, I don't know why we're stuck on this one. I'm answering this question about age group. It's probably not even what you asked.
No, it's actually really interesting because sometimes I can see there might be difficulties of grouping different ages, especially for the older ones to be with the smaller ones. Sometimes they can look like maybe they're bored or why am I here?
I think it depends on the scale of the event. So when we've just done stuff at festivals, for example, because there's such big audiences and you're going to get audiences of all ages, it's much easier to kind of play that this is for everyone game, because the teenagers will come in, and if they feel like kind of like being playful, they'll come and be playful. I'm sure that you'll have seen teenagers in your life who have got into costume or something, and they just want to play.
Yes.
But if you're doing a smaller event, like so say a workshop, it is really important to get that right, because if you have too many of the younger ones, the older ones are just not interested.
Yeah, that's exactly
the other way. It's that way around. It's not the other way around. So if you really want to target teenagers, you've got to target teenagers.
Yes,
that isn't in my philosophy. That's just in the nature of the way that our society forces us into these kind of age group tramlines. So a bit like gender. The age group thing is a kind of an area of binary thinking.
Yeah, it's a kind of a cultural influence, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
We used to grow up in that way and we think that way. And I was really interesting before you touched on your people that inspired you, because that was one of the questions I wanted to ask, if there is one or two figures because sometimes I think we can get overwhelmed between the difficulties of budgets, but if we can keep our fire inside alive. And for me, sometimes I know Fred Rogers has been one of them, and Reggio Emilia people like Approach and important educators have been one of them. So I wonder for you who these people are.
I think there's been so many amazing kind of influences on the work I've been doing. In that very early stage with the nursery, I loved the work of Elena Goldschmied and People Under 3. I think it's been a few years now since I've picked that book up, but it was very inspiring to me at the time, and I think it has also influenced me in my thinking about humans and how their brains work as well. And there are some really simple things about that book which which kind of carry on, even though we are in different developmental age groups. I think there are ways that our brain patterns work and our way our learning works, which actually is quite common to all age groups and all humans. So very much we're all different. We all think and learn differently. And she does these schemas, which are, I think, the more sophisticated nursery schools in the UK, because there's a really amazing network of nursery schools in the UK which have very specialist early years training, and they are really also very inspiring. And they talk about schemas and ways of thinking about where people's kind of like, Eleanor Goldschmidt talks about people under 3. So she talks about this kind of thing of like, how do people's minds work, and what can you see them doing? And I mean, really simple things like I don't remember the names of the terms, but when you see children who just continually line things up the whole time, and that's they can do that for hours and hours.
Yes.
And that's just what they do. And then other people will put things inside something else for hours and hours. And that's what they do. and they, we change these things, but they kind of, just to kind of have one size fits all for people is just never works. So you have to have a variety of opportunities, of offers, of kind of ways to follow the individual child. But she also talks about, I don't know, and again, it's really nice to talk about this younger age group. I don't know, maybe I've just watched one of your videos where you were telling a very simple children's story. So that's why I'm back in that space. But I think it is really the wellspring of our own, self-confidence, of our ability to remain in that space of curiosity, of how we can relate to each other socially. So that age group is so important. And she also talks about kind of natural materials, and this is like way before there was any kind of understanding of the kind of huge crises that we're in right now, and how we need to all kind of reconfigure our relationship with nature and, well, ourselves as nature. But she talks about, so that there's a wonderful, do you know this book?
I don't think. Perhaps if I see written the name of the author, but
I think it's definitely one to.
I'll make sure to put it in the notes. So that people can check it out. Yes.
Yeah. It's I mean, it's a very, she I think she's no longer with us. She lived to a very venerable old age, but she was so she was writing this book decades and decades and decades ago, but it was she had this thing with the treasure basket, which giving young people under 3 a kind of treasure basket, and in that treasure basket you just have natural ingredients, from pine cones to kind of to wooden spoons to kind of like just objects that they can kind of like explore and experiment with, that are kind of that are made of textures and that are different. So there's a kind of like and there's that sensory thing is really important, all of these things I think they carry on, even though now I'm working with a much older age group, like my work is now teenagers and young people sort of in their 20s, 30s, and everybody else, but
and
there's still the same principles lie, which is a multi-sensory, cross-curricular, let people explore, not tell them or guide them too much. Sort of let them find their own place that they feel comfortable in, and where possible kind of, or sort of, and yet where possible do kind of, steer them towards things they aren't confident about, so that they can feel more confident in those areas. So when we've done events and we always have a stage of some kind, where the audience can perform on the stage, as well as the artists and the creatives who are delivering the workshops and stuff, and it's amazing how you can get the shyest young person to come into their confidence, to be able to kind of perform, or to speak, or to share in some way if the request or the provocation is strong enough in the narrative, or in the kind of there's a bigger reason, a higher purpose than just the performance.
Yes.
So they have something to kind of,
they forget about themselves, and then they just go and do the thing.
Yeah.
Somehow.
I also really love puppetry, because I think that puppetry is a really amazing way of everyone, whatever their level of confidence, creating a performance and to share a kind of narratives and dialogues, because when you're operating a puppet, your ego is projected into the puppet, and you're not in your head. You're not feeling subconscious, because because everything is in the kind of the character that you're creating. So I think puppetry is a really powerful tool.
Yes. And I was wondering if, because you have so many years of experience, and you must have seen the most extraordinary, in the good and in the bad, things happen. And I wonder if you could tell us some things that particularly stuck with you and made you grow, both in the good or in the brackets bad, because I know there is never a bad, but we have sometimes expectation and things can go different ways.
I mean, I've done so many projects over so many years with so many different people and with such different scales. And I mean, I think it's pushing yourself beyond what you think you're capable of is brilliant. But there is that kind of moment often in any event where you go, oh my God, something's going to go horribly wrong in this. And, I've been very, very fortunate in that I've managed to do, I don't know, over 100 different events of all scales, like from I think the most we've had in one event was 300 people delivering a kind of experience. So that's just the performers or the participants. I mean, lots of volunteers, and then smaller, more staged theatrical things as well. And so many moments which has motivated me, where you see, and I talk about transformative learning, not informative learning. So informative learning is when there's a set of information that you kind of learn, and then you regurgitate it to show that you know it. This is exemplified in our education system everywhere. So even at a very young age, we have primary coloured things, I believe, just so that we can feel a checkbox when the child can say that's a green hat, So
yes.
it's like, what about viridian and emerald and sort of like lime and kind of, like, what about all this amazing kind of variety of colors that we could have? Why are we doing primary colors? Like a child is at their most, when they're young, they're very bored, in that very early age group, they have the most sophisticated range of visuals,
and
taste and smell, and they're at the height of their powers. Give them variety.
Yes, you must be happy if I say that one day in a workshop about color, which is very much my passion, we spent 1 hour on browns, and I was so happy that brown is not boring. We have so many browns, and we can add them with strong colors, and it was just amazing, because again, it's not something that is used to work with very much.
And brown is the color that you get when you mix all the other colors together as well.
Yeah, it was so
it's kind of like, it's got all the colors in it.
Yes. And
although not when you use light.
Yeah, it was really, really fascinating, and I'm sure color is one of the things that is easier to take as a subject when you work with creativity, isn't it?
Yeah, and smell and taste, and like these are very underutilized.
Yeah, and you were telling us about transformative learning. Can you talk about that?
So the informative learning is the stuff that's everywhere within our education system, because in my opinion, it means that we have this kind of mechanistic society, which is about like one thing like having an effect on something else and leading to something else, and it's really easy to kind of check that it's being done, and there's a sort of the standardized testing thing happens at all levels, including kind of to the testing of the teachers, the testing of the schools, the testing, some of which is valuable because you can see where things needs more support and more help. But there's a the trouble with that kind of learning is that it's not coming from within. So the transformative learning is where you have a kind of a paradigm shift of some kind in yourself. So you kind of conceptually take on something that you hadn't conceptually taken on before. So you can see it in every second of a young child's life, because they're kind of, everything's for the first time. So they're like, it's this transformative learning is their state of being at all times.
Yes. So can you tell us a little bit, for example, just in practical example, transformative learning in an activity that you did, for example, just so that the listeners can get a grasp of what practically means?
Yeah, so I'm just thinking about the kind of some of it's sort of quite philosophical. It's very hard to think of examples when you're kind of like trying to explain some philosophical context. I've got, for some reason in my head, I've got this giant ogulon, which is the kind of the sort of we did it a few times. It was kind of like a space creature that was kind of an invented narrative, and it was it would travel through time and space and kind of sing the song of the universe out to other planets and to other solar systems, and it would come at certain times of the year and lay its eggs in very special magical places, and it had laid its egg in these kind of, when we did our event, there was an egg, and we had the the kind of the science laboratory where the kind of you'd go and learn about habitats and food and kind of like, and as kind of little mini scientists, you'd try and look at kind of what the animal is and what it needs, and just try and get a little bit more understanding around it. And the amount of times where as you're trying to kind of get your head around this space creature, kind of things around the natural world would sort of start to kind of make sense for young people, because you start thinking about habitat not in a way that is like, learn about the habitat of this particular animal, but you'd sort of kind of get it from a kind of a sense of inquiry or I
get it now. It's also Reggio Emilia approach uses this inquiring, and also it has something to do with child-led or person-led experience. What I liked about your website, and I will definitely put it in the notes for the people to have a look at, is that you invent words very often. And I'm not English, and one of the things I really liked about the website is that in your pedagogies, at some point there is written about making word glossaries. Not only because we need to explain our language to someone else, but because we are going to invent stuff, and so we want to explain that.
I think it's really helpful. What I didn't sort of talk about, because as you were saying the website, I was like, which website are you talking about?
Oh yeah,
because there is, maybe for your audience, that there's been a kind of paradigm shift in the work from 2018, where I'd gone to, this isn't going to answer your question, but just a bit of context. We're now doing kind of the narratives have shifted from the parallel universe, the universe of stories and invention and mythology and make-believe, always embedded in place and history and geography and science, and there was always that kind of rootedness in it. But now, because I've kind of, which I maybe is too long for now, I'm dedicating the work to the various crises we're in with the climate and ecological emergency, and so the narratives have shifted to sort of future and what does the future look like, feel like, taste like, how are we going to live in the future, which is so rich with so much stories and mythology, but it's vital stories and mythology that we if we don't start imagining on a big scale in the mainstream, we're not going to be able to build, and we're not going to be able to move towards that greener, fairer, wiser future. So what I miss about the work that I was doing before was just the ability to kind of invent and make it up, because it's so fun. and actually, in order for the power of art and culture is to get people to kind of understand things laterally, so they're not it's a kind of way of coming to something through our own internal processes. So we kind of we filter, like when you read a book, you can even like as a young child, if you're reading a fairy tale or a story, one day you might be and I'm going to use these horribly cliched traditional fairy tales, which we never actually used in our work at all, really. But you could one day be the princess, but the next day you might be the prince, and the next day you might be the monster. And then in your mind, you're kind of, what does it feel like to be that character? And by kind of being in that character, you can really learn so much about other people's perspectives and other ways of thinking, and you can start kind of having empathy for what that monster must feel like, as it's kind of, terrifying people or whatever. And I think that that's such an important part of our own awareness and our own ability to imagine. And when you can imagine, you can have empathy, and when you have empathy, you can take action. So what I miss is that ability to freestyle it, because I know that with the future thinking, whatever we're going to call it, future literacy, or it's really important to be grounded, really grounded as much as possible in reality, because we can't start kind of thinking about space rockets that are going to take us to other planets at this moment, when we've got such a scarcity of resources and we're going beyond planetary boundaries. So there has to be a kind of a quite a sophisticated set of parameters to any bit of imaginative thinking.
Yeah, this is
and whatever age group as well, because it's really important as early as possible for people to kind of know they have to kind of imagine within certain constraints. So I'm getting close to being confident enough about my own personal knowledge, because I've done a lot of learning myself over the last few years, to feel like we can start to kind of go off piste a little bit more again now. I mean, we have done it a little bit. So we a couple of years back, we did a project in the Tate where we kind of created the Great Imagining Ideas Machine, and we kind of we had a little bit of kind of game playing, and we had people in kind of costumes, and there was there was a little bit of playfulness going on, and I felt like, okay, this is good, this is what we're
going in the right direction.
I feel like that now I'm getting the work back again. So
but I suppose
you asked me.
No, it's fine. Many things you made me think while you were talking. One of them is the constraint as artists, because I'm an artist primarily. I think that constraints are not necessarily bad, because they actually push your work in direction that are unexpected and often higher quality in my personal life. For example, now with my friends and colleagues, we are doing the 3 materials challenge. That I'm not minimalist, so it's really hard. But from that, first of all, you learn a lot, but also the results are unexpected. So I can appreciate as an artist the power of constraints. But also when people jump on your website, because you said at the beginning, which website? Because if you type the House of Fairy Tales, for example, which has been your main project in the last, however, 18 years, you end up with 2 already, and you can decide which way you go. There is the House of Fairy Tales, which is the archive of what you've done, and there is the Great Imagining, which is your full-time present project. But even then, because when you said at the beginning, there were 2 things, there was creativity and the sensitivity around nature. After all, it's almost like there was an evolution. You started with the creativity, and organically you got to the other thing. There was primarily also your interest from the very first time, isn't it?
I mean, I think that for me, I don't think that learning or creativity is anything without community and without kind of how you build a purposeful life. So for me, it was always outside of the boundaries of art. Like I went to art college, but I'm so much more interested in, I don't know, like the scope of how we cook things, or how do we kind of make our clothes,
Yeah.
or how do we kind of like those practical things
It's
are as
interesting.
exciting to me, because they're kind of like this space of like this is like basic kind of survival, and then on top of that you can then kind of create the kind of the layers of all the more like extra. And then, don't get me wrong, I've had the most extraordinary amazing cultural experiences, mind-blowing stuff, and I value it, but I do think that we should somehow, like, because the more you see things that are done over there by some other people, it's the fourth wall thing, you know. It's like the it's so far away from your own experience that you can't feel that that's something that you can achieve, especially if you come from a background where there isn't that practice in your family, or you're not given access to these experiences normally, or well, you've got a lack of confidence or something, you know. Yes. It's so important to kind of start with where people are at.
Yes.
So I think it's sort of now I'm forgetting your question again.
No, it's interesting because when I say arts, as an Italian, probably, I think historically, when we talk about art, is very broad term, because Italy's got some art is intertwined with, as you said, cookery and gardening. Yeah, and art. We're putting it all the same. That's why when I talk about the arts, probably even science is in the arts. You know, in Italy, it's a slightly different culture. I noticed when I started to come to university in the UK, I struggled immensely, because Italy is in a humanistic culture, while I found that England is more a practical science-based, and I struggled a lot because of that, because we are all about cross-disciplinary and mixing, and, you know,
so interesting. Yeah.
When I listen to conversation, for example, on Italian radios, or people talking, even in editorials, publishing, they never only talk about their thing. There's always something. It's so deep and intertwined. It's very, very, I suppose, probably even France, very layered and complex, not difficult, but complex. There's a lot in it. It makes it very rewarding experience. Yeah. So yeah, no,
I mean, it's kind of it's hard when you generalize, because you're bound to get it completely wrong, aren't you? But like, I think that the you know, the Italian culture is, you're so surrounded by history, cultural history. You know, I mean, I'm just thinking of friends who live in Rome, where everywhere you look, there is a part of the kind of ruins of ancient Rome, and you're so steeped in that, all of that it's almost like it's impossible to kind of like
detach it,
departmentalize, you know, and sort of put that into the culture section, and then there's this other section, because it's everywhere and all around you. And I think the English culture has such a strong class system, and such a strong, you know, there, for people who are in a privileged family background, they had much more access to having culture around them, and that sort of sense of the possibilities of things. But I don't know that really explains why we have such a sort of what I'm going to call mechanistic society education system, because it is true. I think that the kind of formulaic subject areas are so entrenched in our psychology,
which I think is why
slip over. I mean, you know, even with where we are with the climate and ecological emergency, like, you know, that you have to be within certain disciplines in order to discuss certain subjects, rather than seeing the systems thinking, you know, the interconnectedness of things, because we are everything is connected to everything else, and that you cannot see anything in silos.
Yes, yeah, sure. Because I live on this silo-white biosphere in the last recent years, also in my mind, first in my mind, but then almost as an organic consequence in my educational experiences, there has been this idea of becoming the other, because we as humans are notoriously, for us, it's really hard to become another. creature, plant, mushroom, whoever. And so I also base a lot I try anyway to, and for children and young people, it's interesting, but I think for adults as well, in a way, it's how difficult, isn't it? Become the other, whoever this other is. But I have two questions there because of the, in a way, in brackets, environmental purpose that you in your work have now. I have two questions. They really come from my heart because I'm struggling from a point of view of an educator for two things, which is, I suppose many others do. One is how we make friends the high quality of experience with the low budget that more and more we are faced with, especially these days. And the other question is, if you have any thought about it, of course, how do we use more environmentally friendly materials when we want the not the high quality result, but the experience to be full? And I mean, when I use colors, just to do a practical examples, I notice sometimes, very often, that the cheap colors that they sell, they don't mix properly, they don't mix well. And I want the young people to have the experience of mixing the colors, because as we were saying before, then you really discover what's inside the brown. And first of all, I stumble across budget problems, but also on the fact that are not environmentally friendly, high quality materials available to educators, I would say. They're pricey.
Yeah.
I wonder your thoughts about this.
Yeah, really good questions, really amazing questions. Like, and you struggle with it every day. Like all of us as individuals, the more you learn about where we are as a species, every choice at every moment of every day is a choice, and is a decision to make. And I did some kind of personal development work where they you have decisions and then you have choice, and when you make the choice, then you live with it. That's you. There is no other. You can't go back and go, oh, I should have chosen something different. You chose what you chose. So we are where we are. What so is what so. We are here, and I think every decision has to come from a place of integrity. So if you need to use a good quality material, it's because that's the only way of getting the really good result that you want to get. But also the really good material could be found objects that you find in the park. So it depends on what you're trying to do and trying to achieve. Fundamentally, I think a bit like the conversation about how we live in the Western lifestyle compared to with people who I'm working with in Uganda or parts of Africa, it's like we are so privileged that we should be kind of like really reducing our privilege, and people in countries that don't have privilege should be using more. And I think that actually in another kind of ironic way, I could say that children should be given the best quality ingredients because they haven't used up much in their life, but we shouldn't be wasting it, and we should be teaching them the preciousness of these materials. So if they understand how precious these materials are, they will value them. So in a way, like, give them really good quality materials, but get them to really value and understand the quality, maybe even kind of give them some sense of where those materials have come from. I don't know where half the materials come from. Like when you take some what do you call it when the colors are ground up, pigment.
Yes.
Like, where are these pigments from, and how do they come to us, and how far have they traveled? Like,
and how long do they take?
If you as an educator ask those questions, share those questions with the students. Like one thing I haven't quite managed to do in the work that we've been doing so far, but I'm determined to make this happen, is to do a really good audit of the embodied carbon in the event or the exhibition, and to help communities and help our organizations to be able to kind of do that themselves, not because they like it's a competition of like who uses the least carbon. It's so that we can kind of use that as a learning experience. Like there was right back at the beginning of the conversation, I where I was talking about this this nursery in the flat, when we were when I was kind of conceptualizing how this was going to be incarnated in this building in Shoreditch, which never happened, of course, because I didn't manage to raise all the millions of pounds it would have required. But I really felt passionately that it's not about what you put in the building. It's about the building itself should be educational. So I got really excited about and it's interesting because in 20 years I've changed my thinking so much. But I was thinking, the toilets should be like, part of the experience. Like, what if we had transparent pipes running through the building so you could see the poo and the wee flowing through?
Oh my God. I really have to tell you this, and my listeners, some of them will already know that my partner is just opened the National Poo Museum, and that's exactly what they did.
Amazing. There we go. Like that we were meant to talk. Obviously now I'm kind of like, I think, plumbed in toilets, are of the past, and we need to really think, we need to use our waste much better. Because like everything, we need to value everything that the circular economy of everything. So now I would be much more in thinking about kind of maybe some more high-tech but compost toilets of some kind, like where, yes. but it was that thing of like, use the educational potential of everything.
Yes.
Don't waste the educational potential of everything. So when you use materials, think about how to tell the story about what those materials are and why you chose them. Mm-hmm. So, like if you're going to make really beautiful, like, if you're going to have really beautiful paper, is it possible to do a workshop where you make the paper first? And obviously it's really difficult to make good quality paper that's really nice to use. But maybe
no, that would be the point of understanding.
But maybe kind of like showing how difficult it is to make paper means that when people have pieces of paper, they're valuing it more. Mm-hmm. So there's kind of like this kind of educational journey that you go on. And I think it's really, I absolutely would be an advocate for high quality materials. I love Sharpies, hate felt tips. And Sharpies are so much more expensive. And when I see lids being left off Sharpies, I get really upset. But it's that thing, and they're plastic, and how much longer are we going to be able to have things like that in our lives? I don't know, but it's so important to think about with care about how high quality things can be in the lives of young people of all ages and backgrounds and circumstances, so they can taste the value of things, and not just the art materials, but like the food that people eat. Like when you eat really good quality ingredients, they are, you don't need to do very much to make it delicious. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, I've just been staying in my friend who's got a very huge market garden, and very fortunate to have that, but and it's supplying fruit and vegetables to restaurants, and it's like it's when plants are grown in the garden and are eaten fresh from the garden, they taste completely different, and we just don't understand that because our food has traveled so far. Mm-hmm. And we don't, and and it's gone through such an industrial process most of the time that it just doesn't taste the same. So it's it's all of those things as well. So it's not just the art ingredients, it's like every ingredient.
Yeah, and all the learning, which is the life. And I wonder if from this new point of view that you are developing in your journey, what do you think about the power of creativity and imagination in this respect of shaping? I mean, when you work with young people, involving creativity and imagination, I was more thinking if we would explain this to a parent or even to an institution or an organization, how do we involve creativity and imagination? Because there's lack of the use of these two things in our...
I mean, we all have to be brave and talk truth to power at all times. And we are in a climate and ecological emergency, which is arguably escalating, and is in a kind of a, what do you call it? It's just when things go out of balance, and they go exponentially out of balance, mm-hmm. everywhere. so we need a different kind of way of thinking and being in order to be able to find a way of kind of bringing ourselves to a possibility of having a future for humanity. And that is the reality of our science. That's what all the scientists are telling all the politicians. And for some reason, the politicians are just not communicating it bravely to the people. And so, we can't solve the problems with the same methodology that created the problems. We have to new. So, on every level, whether we're talking the ecological emergency or whether we're talking about new businesses that are emerging and new and old industries that are dying, or disappearing, we need all the new businesses and all the futures activist organizations are all saying we need innovation, we need flexibility, we need to kind of imagine what might be possible as en masse, as a whole society, to be able to kind of like find our way, feel our way through to what might be possible and what might emerge. There's a kind of and this is the nature of really good quality education I've always believed in, and it's now being like, the future is crying out for us to be this way, which is about, like, there's a kind of methodology that came out of UNESCO called futures literacy, which is I did a couple of courses on it, and it's living with uncertainty and allowing for emergence. And we have this idea that we've got to find a solution. We've got to find a solution to transport. We've got to find a solution to kind of waste, or it's often the solutions are the things that cause the most problems, or just create new problems where there wasn't a problem. So we have to kind of somehow work together. So collaboration and cooperation is another really important value. Like our education system is so much about competition. It's like, as individuals, we're meant to kind of like get the kind of high marks, or get the most beautiful picture, or whatever it is. The best is when we work together. I've just been at a wonderful little happening in West Wales where there was a workshop which was run by a kind of someone who called Lucy, who runs the costume department at Wimbledon School of Art. And she was working with, again, an audience of all ages. So there was babies in the workshop, and there was teenagers, and there was kind of adults. And she got these big piece of paper, again, using big piece of paper, which maybe kind of, arguably like, oh no, trees are cut down. But, I don't know whether they came from, but there's ways of finding these big pieces of paper that might be recycled or whatever. Anyway, let's not get distracted. So everyone was working together to draw these really big, very animated drawings where they were doing life drawings of these dancers who were moving around the space. So they were doing these kind of very moving drawings, very fluid lines and very exciting, dynamic images. And then they then, I don't think they realized this was going to happen, but then she kind of got them to tear these drawings up into pieces. And then she, like, with her encouragement, like, created these amazing costumes on the dancers from all this paper that looked like some kind of extraordinary thing from the 1930s, or the kind of, it was amazing kind of forms. And then the dancers then like did another kind of whole dance routine around the site, and then at the end all the paper got taken off them, and that was, and it was all gone. And so in many ways that is that's not how our normal workshops work, because people like to be able to take something home with them. But what they took home with them was the experience.
Yes.
So that experience of being part of an all age group that kind of could create this amazing piece of theatre, where they kind of designed these costumes, and then they watched the costumes being performed, and it was hugely rich and satisfying, and felt like something that we can definitely take into the future with us in our smaller communities, where we kind of can make and do things ourselves, and we can have very rich and high level cultural experiences.
Yes, sure. And Another question I wanted to ask is, which project are you working on? I say now, but probably in the near future, which is the thing you're putting all your energies into?
Well, we're making newspapers.
Okay.
So, but the newspapers are kind of interesting because they got articles from experts, from scientists, from people who run organizations, from people like yourself, like from people who work in imagination education, and then also from teenagers and young people and college students, and everything is about ideas about a greener, fairer, wiser future.
Yes. So this is a real collaborative project.
So it's highly collaborative, and it's basically it's a connecting thing. So it's kind of, I call it cultural mycelium. So it's connecting everything together. There's loads of like kind of suggestions for podcasts and for books and for sort of, so people can kind of get further ideas and reading. And
where can people find these newspapers?
Oh, you can get them on our website, and if you want to kind of be part of that process, then we'd love to hear from you, because we're using them as a way of encouraging people to do activations in their communities around all these very complex subjects. And we're gonna be supporting communities so in April next year, we're planning on doing 100 activations in 100 different kind of communities, not just in the UK actually, because we're also working with people abroad.
So when you say activation, can you tell our listeners, what do you mean by activation?
Well, an activation is sort of really how we've always worked, because it's always been something that's somewhere between an exhibition and a theatre and a workshops and conferences and symposiums and talks. So it can be any scale. It can be tiny, or it can be bigger. And it means that people are making and exploring complex ideas about the future, and how they imagine the future to be, and what sharing case studies and stories of good practice. And there's some fun activities that we are sharing with people and suggesting that they can do within their community, which gets people sharing where they're at. And again, different age groups. There's probably the compass thing I do, which is in the facilitator's guide, because you can use this as a kind of conversation starter in communities and groups. Probably it's more for the 14 plus age group, but there's again, it's that thing of for the younger ones, bringing them into these conversations as early as possible without frightening them, and actually for teenagers as well, without, because it is so mind-blowing when you really look into it, that there's a spiraling eco-anxiety in schools. And I think for young ones, they're quite resilient, but you don't want to go tell them some apocalyptic future. Because what's the point in that? Because you want them to be there at the beginning of their life, and they want to be sort of like in that space of awe and wonder, and
you want to give them power, not to take the power away.
And there's been sort of there's been studies around that when for example a climate scientist goes into a school and does their kind of PowerPoint presentation, it can lead to kind of denial on one hand, and then anxiety and mental health issues,
overwhelm,
and neither of which actually put you into action. And what we need is a generation of active young people who can be given platforms by people who are older, by their elders, to be able to kind of demand that as the people who, that their elders in whatever position of in whatever power they have, to use that power for a greener, wiser, fairer, wiser future. So
yes. So I mean, this conversation could have so many different, partly because your experience is so wide, and also the subjects are so important that it probably could be like a long day workshop or a long day talk or something.
There's a kind of little pamphlet that we have that I said we wrote.
The workshop facilitators. I'll put that in the notes.
It's where you go on the website, it has a link to it, but it talks about here some of the kind of our educational philosophies, and that actually some of which I've touched on today, but it kind of, I think the work I've been doing all the way through has always been this. And so at any age group and in any community, at any stage, and whether you're talking about just having fun with kids and just talking to them about kind of stories, or whether you're talking to them about kind of, things about the supply chains and the kind of the bigger kind of systems, that it's really important to get those philosophies right. And well, I mean, it's not, again, there's no right or wrong, but it's in the I think that kind of thing about intrinsic motivation. Did I say that? The intrinsic motivation and the extrinsic motivation, for example. So extrinsic motivation is where you have rewards and punishments out in the world. One of the things where which I kind of, there was a kind of one summer where we did a whole series of events around the country, like as a traveling art circus, and we were doing these kind of challenge, these big narrative extravaganzas where we kind of had like kind of, there's a bigger story, and then there was challenges and tasks along the way where you could get kind of stamps and badges and then medals.
Yes.
And I realized that the kids were going completely addicted to the medals. So they were, how do I do another task? Because I've got to get a badge, and then I've got to get a stamp, and then I've got to get, and there was like a little in the passports, and it was all kind of like it was a kind of game. But I realized they were spending so much time on the obsession to get a medal that they weren't actually sitting with and doing the kind of activities. And the idea was that they would try different things. But I did kind of realize that I was tipping towards this thing which I don't believe in, which is the rewards and punishments out in the world, and not enough in the intrinsic motivation, which is where you sit in that space of curiosity and inquisitiveness, and you slow right down, and you really engage with, and you feel the kind of awe and wonder of learning. So.
Yes. Oh, how interesting. And my last question would be, because you have probably collaborated with many other interesting people in your journey, I wonder if you think that would be somebody that we shouldn't miss to interview in this podcast.
Oh, so many. I've got a whole list. I thought of, because I knew you might ask this. So there's 6 people I've got on this list right now.
Okay, go on. You want to hear them.
So Alex Lammy I've put at the top, and he, only because he lives on the Isle of Wight. Do you know him?
Oh, no, I don't think so.
He does a very interesting project with Futures Literacy. He's one of the people who did the Futures Literacy course I did. And he has this amazing story about Enki, which he doesn't, you have to experience it with him. So you have to go to one of his events to experience it. But, it's something very, very special. And if you can get the opportunity, and I think because he lives on the Isle of Wight, I think you might be able to kind of like,
okay.
And I'll happy to introduce you. And then if you want a little bit of the kind of the academic side of things, then there's someone called Dr. Penny Hay. Do you know her?
No.
She's just been appointed Professor of Imagination at Bath Spa University. So, which is kind of
I would go
a great job title.
Yes.
And she runs something called the House of Imagination. So there's kind of like lots of the dances that we've done over the years. And so she's very good at the theory and the kind of the reports and the kind of the kind of academic studies around play and imagination. And then there's someone called Adriana Morales who works with a group of colleagues on this thing called Step into the Amazon. And she's Brazilian, and they work with this indigenous community in the Amazon, and her work is very magical, and it's all about kind of amplifying the voices of the community within the education system in other countries. She's moving back for a year to go to Brazil because she wants to work with the Brazilian people, because in the UK, we need to understand the influence that our behaviour has on communities like that. But also in Brazil, there's a lot of very privileged people who live in Brazil who don't understand the systems that are threatening our future. And her work is very, very playful and very directed at young people, and is very engaging. She's a filmmaker as well, so she's kind of like animator, so they're very magical. And then Oliver Wallace does this thing called Patchlarks. I've worked with him loads, and he does very magical drawing, narrative driven activities with young people. And actually he also has worked with adults and teenagers as well, but he particularly likes working with primary school age children. And I think that because they're at the heightened powers of their ability to kind of imagine and play, he does this lovely thing called mini forests, which is where he kind of gets people to look at the kind of the microscopic forests in moss and in the little tufts of grass that you get in between paving stones, and then build narratives and stories around them. So it's very good for urban children, actually, because he gets them really engaging with nature in a very microscopic level. And then Stephen Whitehead is someone I've worked with loads, and he's working with schools in Birmingham right now. So he's kind of doing lots of carbon literacy with primary schools and secondary schools in Birmingham. And he's doing really playful work with them that gets them to kind of do everything from reimagining their school playground to kind of looking at understanding the kind of how all of our different foods that we eat and where it comes from, and what food groups it comes from, and you know, like the relationship, the different embodied carbon in meat compared to vegetables. So he's kind of doing lots of work around that, and with the different communities in Birmingham. And that's incredibly transformative work. And then Hattie Warboys, I mentioned to you before, who's got this really amazing project called Body Talks Movement, which is about how we live too much in our heads and not enough in our bodies. And she's made this really magical installation that I saw recently, which I was very privileged to experience, which was these young children of who were free dancing after having gone through some workshops that she'd done with them, where they were freely expressing their emotions and their thoughts and their feelings through their bodies. And it's just incredible. And it's like she really gets young people to be in their most communicative and most expressive just through their bodies. So that's really, really special.
Wow, this all sounds amazing. And if one of our listeners would like to find you or contact you, where is the best place for them to see what you do and all that?
Well, we have a couple of social media things. You can go to our website, which is thegreatimagining.org, and you can write to me at Deborah at thegreatimagining.org. We have another website actually as well called thegreatimagining.earth. We've also got the House of Fairy Tales as well, which is the original one that we talked about. But the greatimagining.earth is it's a bit of recycled software, so we're kind of developing it, but it's got all our newspaper articles being put on there, and people can upload articles themselves if they have an idea for an article. So
wow. Every question springs even more interesting things. But you've been already very generous with your time, so thanks a lot.
Probably gone over.
Sure. That's fine. I mean, when it's interesting, I have a priority to the content, as I said, which I always think. So thanks a lot for being on the podcast with us, and really, really looking forward to the future of the Great Imagining.
Thank you, Lucia.
Thanks a lot.
Great to be here.
Thank you.
Well, I think there is a lot to learn from Deborah, someone who is not afraid to continuously learn and change for the love of our planet. I really loved when she said about pushing ourselves beyond what we think we are capable of, because I think this is a key concept when we work with young people, to make their experience remarkable, inspiring and authentic. And also, talking with her made me think that it would be a great idea to have a whole season of this podcast about greener ways to bring creativity to young people and to create more tuning with our planet needs, in which case I think we'll have to bring her back on. I'm going to leave you now with some words she said during the interview that I think are particularly inspiring. When we can imagine, we can have empathy. And when we can have empathy, we can take action. I truly hope you enjoyed our conversation, and I will leave all the links that Deborah mentioned in the show notes. And if you happen to know any little creatives, I started a Patreon for kids, a safe place where they can enjoy the magic of creativity and nature with me. I wish you a wonderful day, and until next time, keep creating.